Alrighty, so with the Leagues Cup tournament about to come to an end, with the final happening on Saturday and also the third place match happening on Saturday as well. The regular season is going to resume very soon. In fact, it's going to resume the day after the cup final and also the third place match. And by the time the season resumes, most of these teams will have just 12 games left in the season. It's the home stretch of the season. It's the playoff push for some of these teams. So I thought, why not make a video talk about six teams that is currently below the red line that I think still have a shot in terms of making the playoffs, and six teams that is currently above the red line that I think they could fall below the red line by the season. And so let us start with teams that is currently below the red line that I still think that they have a shot in terms of making the playoffs. And at number one, and this is by the way is not a rankings, is Minnesota. So, a lot of these teams I'm going to put are kind of like right around the buffer zone because we know that for some of these teams that are way below the red line or and like the bottom feeders are probably already in see you next season mode. They're not going to most likely make the playoffs. And likewise, it's the same for some of these teams that is above the red line, like some of the top three teams in both the East and West. They're probably not going to make a huge collapse to miss the playoffs this season. But yeah, Minnesota, of course, a team that is currently in 10th place. They've been spending most of their time above the red line this season, and then of course they dropped below it, and they've been kind of been teetering around that for the past couple of weeks or so. So I do think that the Loons are gonna make it to the playoffs. I mean, when you look at the Leeds Cup kind of performance that they put so far, you can see the attack has definitely been very good, and that probably the best I've looked in this entire season. Now, my concern, of course, with the Loons this season is kind of the same concern I had last year, where last year how they had that monumentous collapse in September that almost made them miss the playoffs, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that the defense and midfield just completely collapsed. That's what has happened in this League Cup. The defense and midfield has been pretty bad, and that this time they're not going to have that buffer zone and had that kind of insurance policy where if they do collapse in September, yeah, they can still make it to the playoffs. They need to win games to stay above the red line, and that I think they will. I think they'll figure things out. And also, I will say that I think the defense and midfield is going to recover, especially with the way that this team is battling with some injuries of their own. But I do think that this team should be able to make it to the playoffs. Now, when it comes to when they do make it to the playoffs, are they going to do anything? Yeah, probably not, because this is a Minnesota team, and as a rule of being a Minnesota team, they'll just make it to the playoffs, and that will be good enough in terms of them in it, and they'll probably won't do too much once they do get to that round, because again, this team has not won a playoff game ever since the COVID shortened season, and I don't expect that's going to be the same case heading into this season too. And then at number two, teams that are currently below the red line that I think can make it is Montreal. So again, Montreal, it's been kind of weird because this is another team that's kind of been teetering above and below the red line. They had that disastrous start to the season, but things are starting to get better. With the way that they've been very good at home, and I think this season, Montreal is following the classic formula of if you win your home games and you get just enough result on the road, they're going to be able to make it to the playoffs, because with the way that pretty much more than half of the league is going to make the playoffs, you really need to suck to miss the playoffs. And I think Montreal, with the way that they've been very good this season at home, I think that's going to be enough for them to push above the red line. Now, I will say with her on the side of the team, they still need to pick up some road points if they want to really secure themselves above the red line. And like Minnesota, Montreal, I think they're currently just below the red line right now. So again, it's not a big surprise I put these teams in there, because I think these teams by the end of the season, they definitely have a legitimate shot in terms of going above the red line. It doesn't take much too, because if they can get a win or two, they're getting themselves back above the red line. And at number three, it is gonna be Sporting KC. So this is a kind of a bold prediction. The fact that I think they can make it to the playoffs, because for Sporting KC, it's been an interesting season too, where it's kind of similar to the season that Montreal has, although even in a more extreme way, because Sporting KC was just so bad to come out of the gate, and then they had that great recovery in May, only to find themselves in a very inconsistent form, and that again, I do think that this team is still too good to miss the playoffs. I think they'll figure things out. I mean, pretty sure Peter Vermeer's team will eventually figure things out down the stretch, and they should be able to make it to the playoffs. I mean, if they can continue this inconsistent form, I think maybe they'll have enough to get above the red line, because again, if there's one thing we know about the Western Conference this season is that nobody seems to be consistent whatsoever. But if they can just be a little bit better in terms of the inconsistent form, I think that they should have enough in terms of making the playoffs. I mean, they're currently sitting in I think 12th place right now, and they're only a couple points out. Again, it doesn't take long if they can find that magical form that they had in May in the final stretch of the season. Then I think Sporting KC can go on run, and not to mention, with them being much healthier than ever before, like all their attacking pieces are pretty much back healthy for the home stretch. I think the Sporting KC team can definitely make a run at the end of the season. Then we go to number 4, and this is another one of those bold prediction, but I think NYCFC could actually make it to the playoffs. Now, I know obviously they have had their struggles this season on the attacking end, but obviously they have definitely addressed that. Adding that, finding their number 9 in Monsters Bunker is definitely going to help. But I think the biggest thing that will help this team is bring back Maxi Morales. Yes, I don't think he's going to play regular minutes for this team, but he means a lot to this team. That leadership skill that he's going to bring to this team is going to enough to push this team above the red line, and that I do think that. I mean, the other thing is that if they can continue to win their home games, which this season, at home they have actually been pretty good, which is kind of not surprised, because that's kind of is what an NYCFC team is. They always tends to be good at home, because Yankee Stadium has always been a stadium where it's been a nightmare to play for opponents because of the dimension. And even when they do play at City Field, they have a good record there too. So yeah, I do think NYCFC will have enough to push themselves above the red line, especially with the reinforcement that they have bought in. Then we go to number 5. This thing's going to be the Portland Timbers. So this is also an interesting one, because again, I'm kind of betting the fact that the Timbers will figure it out. I mean, this is kind of around that time when Giovanni Savarese rallied the troops and started to get themselves into the playoff position. And last year I know they just missed out on that, but under this current format, they would have made it to the playoffs last season. So I'm thinking that that's going to be the same thing for the Timbers, and especially in their Leagues Cup performance. I thought they performed very well doing this Leagues Cup tournament. The thing that they definitely will have to figure it out is the goal scoring and their finishing, because there's no doubt that there is talent on this team, but that's going to be something that I think is going to be a big question going forward. And again, I'm really betting the fact that seen this story before for the past couple of years, where Savarese, his team has had the back against the wall, but somehow he made a miraculous run in September there, the second half of the season, and they pushed themselves into the playoffs. And I think they're going to do the same thing this year too. And then at number 6, I am going to say, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna say Miami's gonna do it. I mean, I know this sounds crazy, because Miami are just so far from the playoffs, and there are definitely that concern, the fact that even when they do get back to league play, they still have that U.S. Open Cup semifinal game, and then they could potentially play in the final. And fixture congestion could be an issue for this Inter Miami team, especially with their games again. Charlotte has already been delayed to another day, so they're going to be kind of suffering the same problem that LAFC had before, where they're basically playing every single game in a 3-day period. But I do believe that this Inter Miami team has enough. I mean, when you see what they have done in this Leagues Cup, I mean, this is just absolutely incredible what they have done in this Leagues Cup. They have been an absolute buzzsaw, and you got to say that out of all the MLS teams that play in this Leagues Cup, Inter Miami is probably the most impressive one of what they have done. And if they can carry that into the league form, which I think they can. I mean, it shouldn't. I would be shocked the fact that Messi would not stop scoring even once he comes to MLS. I think they'll have enough in terms of making up that points total. But like I said, I can understand why there are some doubters, because when you look at where they're sitting in the standings, they are very far below the standings, and there will be time where I know I've said before where MLS teams they're gonna have to kind of choose their battle in terms of what they really want to commit, and maybe Inter Miami will have to do the same thing if they do have that fixture congestion. But at the end of the day, when you look at how they've been playing so far in this tournament, I do think that they will have enough, and especially the supporting cast for this team. I mean I know it's been some people will say, well, his supporting cast is mostly guys from his that are former teammate of him with Barcelona, with Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets. Really, I mean, when you look at it in the bigger picture in the Leeds Cup, there's guys on this team that has stepped up in a big way. I mean, Robert Taylor is probably the biggest example of it. He has really stepped up in a big way. And don't forget, some of those signings that they have made in the summer transfer window, they have looked good also during this Leeds Cup tournament. So I do think that they not only has the high end talent, but they also have the depth enough where they do need to rest Messi, and they do need to rest some of their key guys. I think they'll still have enough to propel to get all 3 points at the end of the day, and they'll make a miraculous run to make up this point total in the final stretch and sneak into the playoffs. And once they do get into the playoffs, oh boy, I'm guarantee you that I know in the East there are the cream of the top that I've talked about with the teams like Philly, Nashville, and Cincinnati, but believe me, no one want to face this Inter Miami team once they do make it to playoff. I mean, look at what they did in the Leeds Cup tournament. I'm pretty sure no one want to face them right now with how red hot they have been. Then we go to talk about teams that are currently above the red line that I think could potentially fall out of it. And the first team is FC Dallas. So the thing about Dallas that I am concerned is the attack. Again, I will say this with Dallas. I think throughout this Leagues Cup tournament, they might have found another goal scored in Bernard Kamungo. I think he has looked really impressive so far throughout this tournament, and especially I think this is the team that as much as they help out Miami being impressive, Dallas was the team that almost pushed the brink of Inter Miami getting eliminated in the tournament, and that was probably the best game that Dallas, of course, have played, and also at the same time probably the worst game that Dallas had played in the defensive department with them just collapsing late in the game. So yeah, again, despite that, I do still have concern with the goal scoring with this team, and also the road form. They're not very good on the road this year, and I think this is also kind of a popular pick. I think a lot of people have said that with the way that Dallas have been struggling when they come into the Leeds Cup, and I don't know if after the Leeds Cup it will still be a way for them to shake off that struggling form that they had near the summer month. This is a popular pick for people say that they will potentially fall below the red line. Then we go to number two, and this is also a pretty popular pick. And that, of course, is Atlanta United. So again, with Atlanta, inconsistency is a big problem with the five stripes. And again, this team, especially in the Leagues Cup, what is big concern with Atlanta this coming back into the regular season is that they basically did nothing thing doing the Leeds Cup, and it was an absolute failure. And what we saw this happen too in the MLS back tournament, where they did absolutely horrible in the MLS's back tournament. And then once the regular season resumed, yeah, they pretty much missed the playoffs and finished at that time was the worst season in their short span of their franchise history. And I have a feeling it could be the same thing here. I mean, when you look at this team, yes, they have some high end talent on this team, but it just never kind of comes together. And not to mention the inconsistent form. You just never know what kind of Atlanta United team you're going to get from day in and day out. Then we go to number three. Speaking of inconsistency, that's kind of the case with DC United. So DC, I think they're just currently above the red line. And again, I am picking some of these teams that are currently just above the red line that could miss it because again, there is a highly chance that is if they started to go in a bad run of form, and that's kind of what I've thought about DC. Which again, this is a team that I feel like where DC is right now is kind of what I thought that they were. They were going to be a team that I think is going to be on the fringe of making playoffs, and it also kind of depend on what kind of DC team will show up, or really depending on what kind of Christian Benteke show up. Because if we show up the Benteke that can score goals and show his clinical finishing, then probably DC is gonna win. But if they get the Benteke that doesn't able to finish, and it's been kind of an issue that he's been having his whole career, being a very inconsistent goal scored, then this team is probably going to suck. So yeah, with that, I mean, and with you just sitting just above the red line, it doesn't really bolt a lot of confidence that this team will be able to stay above the red line when they continue this inconsistent form. And I really think that it's going to come down to the wire for DC. I think it's going to come down to the wire, come down to decision day, where we could have a situation where and this is not just the East, but also in the Western Conference, like last year, where there was a battle between two playoff spot and 14 was in it. I feel like it's going to be the same case, and DC is probably going to be one of those teams that could be involved. But at number four, I'm gonna say the Chicago Fire. So again, as much as I know, Chicago has been on a red hot form. I'm pretty sure every Fire fans are basically warning everyone that hey, yes, they have been on a red hot form, but this team have fooled me too many times to believe that this is too good to be true, and eventually that drop is gonna happen. And I think last season we kind of saw that too. They had a really good run near the middle part of the season, and then they just fell apart in September. And I just worry that it could happen again. Like for me, I really hope it doesn't, because I think if there's any team that deserve to make it to the playoffs, of any fan base that deserve at least some sort of success, it's got to be the Chicago Fire. I mean, this is probably one of the most cursed team in the league, and a team that has known nothing but miserable for the past decades or so. But again, it's that concern, the fact that is, are they going to collapse like what we all always seen before? That's been the narrative, and I'm really hoping that narrative doesn't continue. I mean, so far Frank Copas, he has done a really good job to defeat that narrative, and especially also defeat the narrative of them blowing late leads, because when you look at how the Fire has been playing lately, they don't they don't do what they did in the early part of the season, which is the narrative of them. Well, yeah, they of course take the lead, but we know they're probably gonna find a very Chicago Fire-esque way to blow that lead, but it hasn't happened. So we'll see whether they keep that. If they can keep that, then I think they'll make the playoffs. But if they can, if the narrative started to come back, yeah, I'm pretty sure everybody thinking that the Fire are probably gonna somehow find a way to miss the playoffs, despite being in a relatively good position to make the playoffs for only the second time in the past decade. Then at number five, this is going to be one that I think I'm going to get hate, but I'm going to say the Seattle Sounders could fall below the red line. And the reason why I say that I'm going to get hate is because the Sounders are currently sitting in fourth place. They're sitting in a pretty comfortable spot. So why do I think they would be missing out on the playoffs? Well, I just think that this team could suffer a bit of a collapse, and especially, you know, they haven't been playing very well for a long time now, and that even doing this Leagues Cup tournament, they still haven't shown me anything to say that they are going to be a team that is going to make a good run. And especially, there's the core that they've been having. I think it's pretty clear that this core is run its course, and that I won't be surprised this team could make some dramatic change during this off season to maybe dismantle some of the core and go into a transitional period. Because again, the issue with the Sounders right now is simply they can't score. Like this team, it looks like a very boring, bland kind of team. And I know Brian Schmitz in the past, he'll find a way to eventually rally his troop, and we always see them somehow had a great run in the second half of the season, but we just haven't really quite seen that in the past couple of years. And when you look at how they've been playing, even before the Leagues Cup, it doesn't really inspire a lot of inspiration that this team is going to make a good run, and especially with teams that are just below them are hungry to take their spot. Like, this Sounders team. Remember when they were the best team in the West, and it looks like they were unstoppable. They have been dropping ever since that, and it's getting to a point where they do have a bad month of form once again, like the one that they've been having for the past couple of months. They could be in dangerous of missing out on on the playoffs, and they do miss the playoffs for the second consecutive year in a row. I would say that there's got to be some dramatic changes, especially in terms of the team that they currently have. And then at number six, the last team that I think is currently above the red line that could fall below, I gotta say the Quakes. And again, the thing that I'll say about the Quakes is, well, as much as they have done so well this season at home, and they have followed that formula where if you win your home games and able to get enough points on the road, you're able to get to the playoffs. And so far that seems like is the case. But the concern I do have with the Quakes is definitely goal scoring. I mean, the goal scoring has been a real problem for this team. And while the defense has been much better this season, I don't know how much is that going to hold in terms of the fact that the goal scoring has been a problem. And not to mention, when I look at the remaining part of the schedule for the Quakes, I think this will really tells the story of this team, because when you look at the teams that they're about to face, I mean, it's not a really tough schedule. I think probably the toughest team that they have to face from now to the end of the season is probably Nashville SC, but they play at home in that game. But there is a lot of team that they're about to face that are just above the red line or right around the bubble zone. I mean, that includes the first game when they do come back into league play, where they go on the road to play against the Vancouver Whitecaps. That's a team that they could be fighting for in terms of staying above the red line. And I've just seen this story so many times where they have a very crucial stretch, and they need to prove that they can win in these crucial stretch and make it to the playoffs. And more times or not, that just have not been the case. I mean, they have shown it a couple of times. I mean, 2020 was an example where they able to pull it out and make it to the playoffs, although barely, with them making it as the eighth seed. And then in 2017, of course, making it on the final day too. So yeah, again, these games are going to be crucial, and that it's kind of for me. I'm gonna say it's kind of similar to what I said about the Chicago Fire, where there's always that narrative of, since this team has been one of the worst teams for the past decades or so, and they always find a way to somehow collapse in the latter part of the season and somehow find ways to miss the playoffs. I'm gonna say the same thing about the Quakes, and I'm really hoping that they can prove me wrong, and that, at least so far, I will say that they have proved me wrong at times, in terms of even during that tough stretch that they had back in June and May, that they actually came out of that relatively well. They came out of that with them still above the red line, which was my biggest fear, because I thought that was going to be the stretch that's going to derail their season, like what we saw last year too. But it didn't. They were able to still stay above the red line. But again, you know, we'll see whether or not that narrative will come, and we'll see whether if they have enough goal scoring, and also can continue to win home games too. As long as they can continue to win home games, I think this team should have enough to make it to the playoffs this season. But there you have it. That is pretty much it. Looking at 6 teams that is currently below the red line that I think can make the playoffs, and 6 teams that is above the red line that I think could fail to make it to the playoffs. As always, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video, and if there's some teams I put on this list that you don't agree, let me know in the comments below as always. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys do like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.